Hi there. How are you today? Oh, it's hard to believe that it is still January, still cold, still a pandemic. But things are looking a little brighter here in Philadelphia where I am, and I hope they are looking brighter where you are. I'm back today with more Patricia Lockwood, of course, and I think today's reading is going to be a little bit shorter only because I'm going to read from where I left off, where the narrator is still talking about the platform until the end of this one section, and there's a sort of logical breaking point, so it's a little bit shorter, but here we go. Other things slipped down, and the fast river of the mind closed over them, so she forgot they had ever been ubiquitous. There was a poet who was walking across America barefoot to raise awareness of climate change. How is this supposed to work exactly? Yet she breathed to herself the words climate change whenever his name stepped toward her in the portal. He posted a new picture of his feet every day so that she saw the innocent blisters spread and break, saw the terry crust grow thicker, saw here and there where a nail had gone in. Flat-footed, she thought, and always hovering behind and out of focus was his grinning face with the swags of stringy hair falling down around it. His glasses were the brass-rimmed ones of a televangelist, and most days he wore a sweatband and a bright orange safety vest. And he walked on the hot shoulders of the country under the endless scroll of its clouds, and he walked. Climate change. One day he was struck by a passing SUV on the highway, and then no one ever saw his feet anymore. Their frank black miles and their nail marks and their mission fell out of the bloodstream of the now. Someone was dead. She had never met him, yet she had zoomed in on the texture of his injuries a dozen times, as she might squint at the pink of a sunset she was too lazy to meet outside. And that is what it was like. LOL, her sister texted. Think if your body changes 1 to 2 degrees, it's called a fever and you can die if you have one for a week. Think if the ocean has a fever for years, LOL. Her sister, 5 years younger, was leading a life that was 200% less ironic than hers, which had recently allowed her to pose for a series of boudoir shots that saw her crouching, stretching, and pouncing like a tigress all over the beige savanna of her suburban house. I'll want them later, after I have kids, she explained. I'll want them in 50 years when I'm old. And her belief in a time when grandmothers in nursing homes, in rocking chairs, drifting out to sea on unmelting ice floes, would sit around reminiscing over their nice boobs and tight asses was so unquestioning that she believed in it too, for a moment, the future. Can I post the one where you're standing by the window wearing nothing but a thong and a Cincinnati Bengals hat, she asked, and her sister, whose love was unconditional, said yes. The chaos and dislocation were so great that people had stopped paying attention to celebrity dogs. No one knew how small they were, or what they were wearing, or if they had recently been revived by an IV after nearly smothering to death in a very hot hearse. The recent era, when everyone pored over pictures of celebrities in velour tracksuits picking up after their dogs with wads of the daily newspaper, came to seem a time of unimaginable luxury, of mindlessness that almost approached enlightenment, came to seem, when all was said and done, juicy. A policeman bends down to the window. A policeman cuts the corner of a grassy verge. A policeman's elbow, fixed around a neck, angles toward the camera. The sky jerks and scrabbles, and then together we are on the pavement. The ruddy necks of the policemen, the stubble on the sides of the policemen's heads, like grains of sand, the sunglasses of the policemen. The labored, officious breathing of the policeman, which was never the breathing that stopped. The poreless plastic of nightsticks, the shields, the unstoppable jigsaw roll of tanks, the twitch of a muscle in her face where she used to smile at policemen. Every day a new name bloomed out, and it was always a man who had been killed, except when it was a 12-year-old boy, or a grandmother, or a toddler in a playpen, or a woman from Australia, and often the fluid moment of the killing rippled in the portal, playing and replaying as if at some point it might change. And sometimes as she saw the faces, her thumb would trace the line of the nose, the mouth, the eyes, as if to memorize someone who was not here anymore, who she knew about only because they had been disappeared. A million jokes about wishing to leave this timeline and slip into another one. We had so nearly entered it. It must be happening somewhere else. The jokes were wistful, because the timeline seemed in no way irrevocable. When she reached out to touch it, it wavered, and she came away with a substance on her fingertips that felt like drugstore lube that could in no way stand up to the kind of sex she wanted to have. That kind of sex was now illegal. As she began to type, enormous fatberg made of grease, wet wipes, and condoms is terrorizing London sewers, Her hands began to waver in their outlines, and she had to rock the crown of her head against the cool wall, back and forth, back and forth. What, in place of these sentences, marched in the brains of previous generations? Faux crimes about planting tulips, she guessed. In the 50s, we would have been housewives, her friend shrugged, sopping up a hangover with a large, humble mound of ancient grains. In the 50s, I would have belonged to a milkshake gang and had a nickname like Rat Bite, she countered, glaring at the salad that had been served to her on a board, forking it with such violence that a cucumber skidded off and landed in her lap, where it sat looking up at her like a fresh, green clock. White people, who had the political educations of potatoes, lumpy, unseasoned, and biased toward the Irish, were suddenly feeling compelled to speak out about injustice. This happened once every 40 years on average, usually after a period when folk music became popular again. When folk music became popular again, it reminded people that they had ancestors, and then, after a considerable delay, that their ancestors had done bad things. The comforting thing about movies was that she could watch bodies that were not feeling they were bodies, moving effortlessly through graveyards, even uphill, wearing clothing whose tags did not itch. There was never a stray hair caught in the lip gloss, the frictionlessness of bodies in heaven, sliding over each other like transparencies, riding love as picturesquely as prairie horses, the sex scenes like blouses brushing against slacks in a closet, not feeling and not feeling all the things she would miss in the clear blue place. Grass sawed at the edge of the sea. It did not have to feel that it was grass. A fur coat in a movie made in 1946 approached a state of being cruelty-free. So far was it from its original foxes. The exception was movies made by geniuses. Everything in them wore a halo that was the specific pain of being itself. Well, and the other exception was when an actress had a little mustache and she couldn't take her eyes off it the whole time. I have the most unbelievable news for you, her husband said one day, and informed her that their downstairs neighbor was currently starring in a reality show called Southern Charm, which, like all reality shows, was about a group of close friends who hated each other. They watched the entire first season in a day, unbelieving. The documentation had been going on under her feet the whole time. Surely some word of hers must have drifted down through the ceiling and into the permanent record. Some album played on repeat, some cry in the night. But no, the more she looked, the more there was no evidence of her, alone in her pain, haloed by her little mustache, locked in her thinking heaven above the screaming, hateful friends. I hate this dildo, she announced. I've always hated it. I'm throwing it away first thing in the morning. They had been exercising it earlier, and it was still tucked between the sheets, bald and shocking and full of fake pearls. Oh, did it hurt? Her husband asked with exaggerated innocence, repositioning the marble carving of his torso on the pillow. Of course it hurt, she yelled, waving the dildo at him like a sex conductor. Its circumference was really huge. And why did they put the fake veins on? She didn't want something that was shaped like a dolphin or anything, but why did they have to put the veins on? Imagine this going up your ass. But I don't want it up my ass, her husband said reasonably, as if wanting something makes it hurt less. The statement sailed through the room as an unintentional piece of wisdom, clean as laundry and full of wind. Oh, she loved to yell, loved to be inconsistent, loved to make no sense in the little awestruck hours of the night, which stared up at her as a perfect audience with their equal little heads. Hadn't she opened as wide as possible earlier? Hadn't she moaned, even said yes, yes, more as he used it on her? She had. Despite all that, wasn't it still her prerogative to throb between the legs? It was. He should have to take it. He should have to endure the shocking thing for once. Men, she said, now satisfied. The dildo went back into its chest. 4 years ago, she would have written a personal essay about this for a women's website called Dangerous Amanda or Brunette Ambition, and she would have been paid $250 for it. But now there was only the moan, the moment, and the sailing wisdom. Now there was only the unrepeatable night. Are you crying? Her husband asked, slinging his backpack into a chair. She stared at him blurrily. Of course she was crying. Why wasn't he crying? Hadn't he seen the video of a woman with a deformed bee for a pet, and the bee loved her, and then the bee died? Her teacup rose to her lips, tilted, floated away again. Raising her head from her spellbound reading a moment later, the cup was nowhere to be seen. Not on the side table, not spilled on the floor or rolled between the unmade bed sheets. Its watercolor garden, shy, thatched cottage, and rim of gilt were gone. She spent half an hour looking, increasingly spooked, for what hummed in her right hand was the feeling that she had put it somewhere inside the phone. That's the end of the section, and obviously, as you can tell, it moves between really serious things that we find on the internet and sort of frivolous minutia, and there's this kind of leveling effect that I think Lockwood is capturing really well, where it all feels like it becomes equal. I love that line from the beginning of the reading where she says, the man had fallen out of the bloodstream of the now. It's like a great evocative phrase about how short-lived anything on the internet can feel like it is. So thanks for tuning in today. Stay well, stay strong, and enjoy time on the portal and time out of the portal. And I'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.